Oh boy, I actually can't believe I'm making this video. So I watched Across the Spider-Verse a few days ago. I think it was second day of release if I'm not mistaken. And don't get me wrong, it's a great film. I had a lot of fun watching it on like a big screen with all the animation and all the music and everything. However, the moment I stepped out of the cinema, I immediately had some opinions on the movie and some things I would have done differently in the movie. And the reason why I wanted to make this video is because the other day I was on Twitter and I saw this. Now, I could have had my opinions and could have forever kept my peace with it, but just seeing this made me realize that I just have to make this video and I have to talk about this film because I'm sorry, but it's not a perfect film, in my opinion. I mean, I know a lot of people love it, and there are a lot of reasons to love it, but there are just certain things about it that I have to sort of talk about. And I think if you're like, talking about it being the best film ever, or at least what the letterbox rating says right now, I think it is reason enough to talk about some criticisms that I have on this movie. So, first things first, this is not a spoiler free review. I'm gonna be going into spoilers. So, if you haven't watched the movie, I would highly recommend go watch the movie and then come back. Please come back and then watch this video. And one last thing I want to add before I actually get into the rating and discussing the film, I just want to say that I basically saw the first trailer of this movie and I basically sort of ignored all the other marketing that they did for this movie because I personally don't like the way Marvel is currently marketing their films, and I'm going to be talking about the marketing of this film also. So let's talk about all the really good stuff about this film: animation, music, Miles and Gwen, Spider-Man 2099, the relationship between Miles and his family, the message of the movie, the expansion of the Spider-Verse, the fact that the short Spider-Man Unlimited, who is like my favorite Spider-Man in terms of the costume design, and the fact that I watched the Spider-Man Unlimited show when I was like a kid, and unfortunately I think it got cancelled after like a season, so it was kind of cool to see him getting some recognition and some screen time in the movie. A promising villain, even though I wished he had more screen time, and the contrast between Miles' character and Miguel's character. So that gives us a total rating of 4.5 out of 5. And I'm gonna be talking about why this movie doesn't deserve a 5 out of 5. So essentially talking about the 0.5 that this movie missed out on. Before I get into the 0.5 stuff and discussing my criticisms of the movie, consider subscribing and leaving a like if you're enjoying the video so far. It's completely free, and if you disagree with my criticisms of the movie, you are completely within your right to unsubscribe. But let's discuss the criticisms that I have about this movie now. The first and biggest criticism I have about this movie is simply the way it ends. Now, I will admit, I kind of forgot that it is a two-parter story, and thankfully I did realize it like around 15 to 20 minutes before it ends because I knew the movie was around 2 hours and 20 minutes. So I knew they weren't gonna wrap it up, and I immediately realized that there is a second part to this. And the reason I kind of forgot about this is because, as I mentioned before, I haven't been really paying enough attention to the marketing around this movie for the reasons that I wanted to enjoy the movie as it is and not have anything spoiled for me. I was personally very happy to see Moist Critical's video on this because I think he talked about the ending of the movie also and why it was not satisfactory for the movie as a whole. Like, it doesn't matter that the movie is a two-parter, this movie should still have a satisfying ending. But the thing is that Charlie said that he had an issue with the ending not being satisfying. My biggest issue with the ending is the fact that it could have been satisfying, and all they had to do was cut out maybe the last 5 to 10 minutes of the movie. Again, now I'm getting into spoilers, so if you haven't watched the movie, click away. For me personally, the best time to end the movie was when his uncle showed up. Because essentially, the climax has been reached, like he knows he's in the wrong universe, he's not supposed to be here, he's stuck here because the big spider thingy sent him here, and he doesn't have means to like leave this universe. So for me, the moment he realized he was in the wrong universe and his uncle showing up was the perfect time to end the movie. I still believe that, the entire sequence with Gwen also realizing it and assembling the squad to save Miles from the other universe basically should all happen. The scene with Gwen and Miles' parents should also happen because, again, it's an emotional moment in the movie where it's clear that something's wrong with Miles and that his family conveys that idea that, they care for him and everything. So I do believe all the Gwen stuff should have happened, but I think when it comes to the universe that Miles was in, it just dragged on for way too long. I think the best moment was just to show the uncle and just cut the film, or maybe cut it at a moment where, like, Gwen assembles a squad and like they essentially go out to save him. Because I'm sorry, like, the reveal of Miles in that universe to be the Prowler of that universe was, I think, just going into the content of the next movie. Because again, like, regardless, he was stuck there anyway, whether his uncle had chained him up or whether his uncle had not chained him up. He was still stuck there, so you didn't have to emphasize the fact that he was stuck in that universe, because he was stuck there from the very beginning, because he didn't have any means to leave or enter that universe. He just came there because the spider that bit him came from that universe. And again, for me, they just made it worse by showing that Miles had that spark in his hand, because that shows you that in the next movie this is gonna take like 5 minutes for him to get out, because they aren't expecting him to have a spark in his hand or some shit, right? So the fact that they even hinted at like how he could have escaped himself in that moment was just dragging on for way too long. And it just annoys me that the climax of the movie was the fact that his uncle was alive in this universe, because the death of his uncle was an emotional moment in the previous film. So you should have left it there and then. They just dragged it on for way too long, in my opinion, and for me that's why the ending didn't feel satisfying to me. Like, Marvel should know that they made a good film here. It has great animation, it has great music, it has great characters. Why are you setting it up for the second film? You know people are going to be there for the second film. The movie was amazing. Why did you have to start dragging the movie along into the second movie? Because now I know, for example, like the first 5-10 minutes of the movie, like if they start with Prowler Miles' universe, then it's like a 5-10 minute fight at the most, because again, they showed he had the spark in his hand, so it should not be a huge issue for him to get out of those chains. So yeah, it does annoy me that, they could have had a really strong ending and they just had to press the cut button and that was it, and they just dragged it on for way too long. And I'm sorry, but it kind of took points away from the movie, in my opinion. Like, look at Infinity War. They ended it on that big moment where Thanos did the snap and half the universe was gone and you had nothing else to go off on. People still showed up for Endgame. They didn't complain that, oh, Infinity War ended so abruptly. No, people showed up for Endgame. That's why it was so successful and it was a good story. But I'm sorry, like, this movie, like, it just had the wrong ending, in my opinion. They dragged it on for way too long. They just had to show that the uncle was alive in that universe and just press cut. My second criticism of this movie is the dialogue. So the day I was supposed to watch this movie, I did see an article going about on the internet of how this movie has dialogue issues, where some audiences are having trouble hearing what the characters are saying on the screen. And I was like, God, I hope it's just like a few cinemas that had that issue. But I'm sorry, in the first 15 minutes of the movie, I was having trouble understanding the dialogue. Like, that entire scene of the museum fight with the Vulture, Spider-Man 2099 showing up, Spider-Woman showing up, a lot of the dialogue was kind of lost on me. And honestly, if I sort of recall the experience, I think the recording and the placement of dialogue was the issue here. Because there were some scenes in the movie, even in the later half of the movie, where there were just too many characters on screen, and if someone was saying something that was sort of instrumental to the plotline, it was kind of lost in the noise of other characters. So I do think the recording and the placement of dialogue was an issue, because they simply didn't realize that you would have 3, 4, 5, even more characters on screen when this dialogue was being said, and so they didn't appropriately account for that by boosting the dialogue of a character who was the point of focus in that scene. I don't think this will be an issue like when the digital release will come out. I think with a pair of headphones this should be resolved, but I don't know, in the theater I was in, I was having a bit of an issue trying to understand the dialogue, especially the beginning sequence in Gwen's universe. And I think that was a really sour way to start the movie, in my opinion, because for me dialogue is just important, like, I'm sorry, dialogue is dialogue. Like, if I am not hearing dialogue properly, then I'm not gonna be happy with the way the movie's progressing. Also because the writing is good in these films. It's not just throwaway dialogue, it's good, really punchy dialogue, and it annoyed me that I was missing a good chunk of it in the first 15 minutes. But again, it might have been some bias of me looking at that article before watching the movie, or maybe I just had really shitty seats and I couldn't hear it properly or something. I don't know, I'm just trying to make sense of the whole situation. But the dialogue was an issue for me, especially because I think the first 15-20 minutes of the movie are decently fast paced. So if I miss one dialogue, I miss the other, and I miss the other, so it's like a domino effect there. My third criticism is a minor one, but I think it's worth mentioning. I really hope they give Spot more screen time in the second film, because I don't think they gave him enough substance or screen time to justify being a good villain. I know he has good potential of being a good villain, but I just felt that the conflict between Miguel and Miles was way more convincing than the conflict between Spot and Miles. And think of it this way, at the end of the day, as a viewer, you are basically most invested in Miles' story, because again, this movie is all about Miles. This entire universe is centered around Miles' Spider-Man. Sure, there is the whole Spider-Verse, but the entire universe and the entire plot lines revolve around Miles. So the fact that Spot is going to try to kill Miles' father means that Spot has to be a really good villain, because Miles is a really good character, so he deserves to have an equally fleshed out and developed villain that is potentially going to take the life of his father. So I really hope that, Spot is developed more in the second movie, and I do predict that, the first half of the movie is going to center around the changes that Spot underwent to give him more substance and more development as a character. And I really hope that happens, because right now for me, Spot is an undercooked villain right now, and he deserves to have more development in the next movie to justify the potential idea that he is going to kill Miles' father. But I do trust Marvel to give Spot the appropriate screen time and development in the second film. But again, as a first film, I don't think he got enough development. My last criticism about this movie is actually something I did not participate in, because I mentioned this beforehand, which is the marketing of this movie. So for this movie, I only watched, I think, the first trailer, maybe even the first teaser of this movie, and I went in and watched the movie. But my criticisms are that if you did watch everything they put out in terms of marketing, the trailers, the teasers, everything, I would say around 80% of the movie is kind of given to you. And by given to you, I mean entire plot lines, I mean entire characters, everything is sort of just given to you already, which is really annoying. And this is why I don't like the way Marvel is currently marketing their films, where they know they have a good movie, they have good characters, they have a good storyline, but again, their trailers will just be full of essentially spoilers. And so after actually watching the movie, I went on YouTube and I watched all the teasers, I watched all the trailers and everything, and it was very shocking to see that most of the movie was all given to you in all the marketing. But then again, also I must admit that it could just be the fact that I've watched the movie and I can pinpoint all the plot lines, but some stuff is kind of just given to you in the trailers, in the way that it's sort of edited and the dialogue placement of certain stuff. I'm gonna link all the trailers and the teasers, everything in the description, so you can actually see for yourself that most of the stuff is given away in the marketing. But one thing I want to draw attention to is the second trailer. If you go to the 1 minute 45 minute mark, the entire point of conflict between Miguel and Miles is essentially given away. Because if you watch the movie, the entire scene where Miles says, to send me home. And he says that, I can, save my dad and I can save the entire universe also. And, the other Spider-Man are telling him that you can't always do that. And, Miles asking about, what about Uncle Ben? And then Peter basically saying that if it wasn't for Uncle Ben, most of them would not be here. I am not kidding you when I say this, but that entire scene in, the headquarters with all the Spider-Man and Miles, the entire conversation is all basically given to you from this time mark onwards in the trailer. And what makes matters worse is that betrayal is hinted in both the trailers and the teasers, and you do see, Miguel and Miles fighting on the train and everything, all the other Spider-Man essentially chasing after Miles. So there is going to be an element of betrayal, and the fact that they just give this entire dialogue sequence of Peter saying that if it wasn't for Uncle Ben, then most of them would not be here, it essentially gives the whole entire plotline away to you that this movie is going to be about the idea that you can't save everyone, which is essentially Spider-Man's entire shtick. Some other stuff that was already shown to you was Indian Spider-Man. I mean, there was an entire 30-second clip that they showed on YouTube 2 weeks before the movie release or something, where the entire intro sequence of Indian Spider-Man is just shown, and he just gives away most of the dialogue that was interesting and fun in the movie in that clip. they just gave it away. Some other stuff that was already shown to us was Spider-Punk, Peter's baby, a good amount of Spider-Man 2099, and his dialogue. Spot was shown, the fight with Miles and Spot was shown. The emotional scene with his mom was like the literal introduction of a trailer. Spider-Man headquarters was shown. Peter from the previous movie was shown. That scene with Miles and Gwen was shown a few times. The elite team that Miguel formed was talked about, and how Miles was not a part of it, and how Miguel didn't want him on the team. Spider-Woman was shown. The Vulture was shown. Even the comedic moments of the movie were shown in these trailers. The bread coming through Spot's stomach, the whatever moment with his parents, the bee in Spanish, the therapist scene, which was amazing in the movie, but it was just frustrating for me to see that scene in the trailer. All this stuff just goes to show why you should never ever watch a trailer for a Marvel movie if you're excited about it, because they just give everything away. And if you're really excited about the movie, you're gonna watch the trailer a few times, let's be honest. And if you watch it a few times and you watch the movie, you're just gonna connect all the plot points that were given away in the trailer. So I do have valid opinions on this movie, and I have valid criticisms on this movie, and I know it might seem overkill, all the stuff that I brought up in this video, but come on, if you're ranked higher on a popular website like Letterboxd over films like The Godfather Part 1 and 2, Parasite, 12 Angry Men, Shawshank Redemption, The Lord of the Rings trilogy, Fight Club, Silence of the Lambs, and dozens upon dozens of great films, then I think all this criticism that I brought up about the movie is fair, because currently on Letterboxd, on their official top 250 narrative feature films of all time, it's the best film according to that list. And I'm sorry, but in my honest opinion, it's not the best film ever created. Could you convince me it's the best modern era animation film? 100%. I am fully on board with that, because I think, if anything, this movie and this entire sort of direction of this universe and story is going to revolutionize animation as a medium, because I think people are going to take animation more seriously now, and there are going to be more interesting plot lines, more interesting movies, more interesting work done in animation because of films like Across the Spider-Verse. But it's not a perfect film, and I really hope the second film proves me wrong, because I'm a huge Spider-Man fan and I really want to love this movie, but I think for me to feel that way, the second movie has a lot of weight to pull. And that's about it for this video. I know I dragged on for a bit, and this is longer than I usually spend on a video, but I wanted to have a thorough discussion on the movie and why I have some criticisms about it. And yes, I do understand that stuff like dialogue issues and marketing is not directly related to the movie, but for example, the dialogue stuff did affect my viewing of the movie, so I'm definitely gonna have criticisms about it. And I do understand that marketing is not directly related to the movie itself, but I do believe it's a valid discussion to have, especially because trailers and clips are all we have when we go into a movie. And if all of this sort of spoils the movie for you, like, think of it this way, like, if you look at the trailers and clips, aside from the characters introduced in that, there's nothing really big major character from the Spider-Verse that makes you go, holy shit. All of it was in the trailers and clips. So aside from the story being weaved together in the film, all the characters and all the cool moments also were spoiled in the trailers and clips. So I think the discussion around the marketing of the movie is a worthy one. It definitely doesn't impact, I would say, the viewing of the movie, but going into the movie for the first time, it definitely does impact it if you've seen the trailers and clips a lot. Once again, if you like this video, like and subscribe. If you disagree with any of my discussions or criticisms around the movie, then that's fair also. I'm just trying to add another perspective on the movie. If you're new to the channel, I do a bunch of commentary stuff that's around movies, games, TV shows, and just general like commentary about life and stuff. So if you're interested in that stuff, a bit of a chill and like laid back sort of channel, then consider subscribing to the channel. And that's all I have to say.